Hi everyone, Tally and Farrell here from Board of It, and welcome to our review of ISS Vanguard, the new cooperative story-driven campaign game from publisher Awaken. For 1 to 4 players, in Vanguard you'll take control of 4 different areas of the ship, alternating between ship management and planetary exploration. Turning to gameplay, the core is dice checks and dice manipulation, which pairs very nicely with exploration and resource management.
Now, obviously this is a big box narrative experience, but what's interesting is that through the planetary exploration, your actions, your decisions, what you discover, you'll create a branching narrative, which means there's also some replayability here in the campaign. And we should say we're very kindly sent this to review by publisher Awaken. But one thing we'd like you to keep in mind is that we were aware of this game when it was originally on GameFound and being crowdfunded, but we decided it wasn't for us, it wasn't our cup of tea. So think about that when we review it, because it will be interesting to see how we feel now that we've actually played it. And if you're interested in getting a copy after the video, I believe it will be open or is open for late pledges.
Right, so how to explain this behemoth? Firstly, it's a story-driven campaign game, which means that the goal is to really experience the story and play until the end of the campaign. The gameplay moves in a continuous loop. You'll be exploring some planets, taking back your findings to the ship, doing some ship management, visiting different areas of the ship, before you go back in the loop and set up the next planet for exploration, and so on until the end of the campaign. The planetary exploration could be considered the bulk of the game in the classical sense. Here you have the map, which is placed in the middle of the table, representing the planet, and characters to control. You'll each take turns, and on your turn you can do 2 actions, of which there are 5 options. You can travel from one location to the next. You can prepare by drawing a card. You can rest, where you'll get back some of your used dice. You can lift off from the planet, and you can also do a special action, which is typically how you interact with the various locations on the planet and how you move the story forward. If you've ever played any of the Nemesis games, then this portion of the game has quite a similar feel. Many of these special actions will require a dice check, which is the core mechanism. You have a number of dice in 3 different colours, most of which have different faces, and all of which have a wild symbol and a danger symbol. During a dice check, you can roll as many dice as you want in an attempt to get the required success symbols, and you can also play cards to help you manipulate the dice and get help from your fellow players. Sometimes the dice check will just require you to roll certain colours of dice, whilst other times you have to land on the specific symbols. Often, rolling a danger symbol will mean that you fail the check or result in some other negative effect. During the planetary exploration, you'll uncover story logs, which will move the story forward and allow you to make all kinds of discoveries. Once your mission on a planet is completed, you'll head back to the ship. Once there, any injured crew will go to the med bay, your discoveries will be unloaded, and maybe your ship's mission will be updated. Then you'll get to decide where the ship goes next and what it will explore, or what planet to head to next. After that, it's time to prepare by visiting different sections of the ship, each of which has a different ability. Maybe you'll go to production to acquire new equipment, to the barracks to recruit new crew, or maybe you'll go to the situation room to defuse potentially dangerous events. After that, you'll assemble your landing crew and head down to the planet of the hour, and then repeat ad infinitum. Now, that really was a brief overview, because there are just so many little touches and side mechanisms that we'd need way longer than a 15-minute video to get into them all. This box has so much to give, and for us it was the exact experience we expected from a box this size and from the blurb of the game. We'd even go as far to say it's Awaken Magnum Opus. And we will note that we haven't played so many of their games, but Vanguard really does feel like a distillation of everything they've learned from their previous games. the exploration mechanism from Nemesis, the elaborate storytelling of Tainted Grail, and so on.
Yeah, I mean, the second you unbox it, you can feel the care and consideration that's gone into it. And from the beginning, you've got a wonderful kind of instruction sheet on how to put everything away and get everything ready for your first game. You then have a really wonderfully engaging tutorial, which takes you through how planetary exploration works and gets you straight in. Now, there's a lot to learn, but it never feels like a chore because of the way they get you through it. And everything here is top notch. The storytelling, the art, the components. And as a tip of advice, definitely get the companion app. It elevates the gameplay, especially because there's voice acting, so it makes the story logs much more engaging. Although the voice actors maybe hamming up a little bit too much when they get to be snarky, and there's a lot of snark flying about. Coming to the gameplay, the Dicey Core is fine. It's not a wow mechanism, but it's very solid and it works. And one thing that's quite good is you have a lot of ways to manipulate the dice so you don't get stuck with bad rolls. And players can also build their dice pools, which means they can kind of take on the game the way they want, which is always a fun and engaging mechanism. On the other side, from the tutorial to where we are now, 20, 30 hours in, the dice core hasn't really evolved in any meaningful ways. And I could see this maybe becoming a bit tedious to some people, especially when we get to another 20 hours of it or a second campaign and so on.
What we do really like about it though is that it's up to the players which dice they roll and how many, which means different players can approach the same special action in various ways. We do also think it's smart that the majority of the gameplay is done via the dice, rather than needing to keep track of 6 different elements of a character and all of the kind of various trackers and tokens that might come with that. At the end of the day though, it is just a mechanism to push forward the story and the exploration elements. The story is excellent and most importantly, it's engaging. And it's a major factor in why we want to keep coming back to this over and over, even after we're done reviewing it. Also importantly, it feels like there's enough branching narratives to go for a second playthrough, even if they are minor story beats. During exploration, there's often just not enough time to see and discover everything, so a second or third playthrough may well be rather different. Exploration is handled via a pre-printed map with card slots. Cards are placed onto the various slots on the map and represent the different locations on a planet, and will typically have a special action that you can do which allows you to interact with that particular location. There are also paths between the different sections which will often require you to spend dice to cross, and sometimes you'll be asked to read aloud a passage when you enter a new section which furthers the story. It's an evolution to the way exploration works in Nemesis. However, like the dice checks, this isn't particularly revolutionary and it doesn't really evolve throughout the campaign. However, the scenarios are rather different. One time you might be doing some peaceful exploration on an alien planet, whilst another time you might be involved in a high-pitched battle against the odds. This is crucial in keeping the player's interest, which is further helped by the fact that there'll be different mechanisms and threats appearing on the different planets.
Be aware though, because these missions you're engaging in, they're dangerous. You can get injured, and if you take too many injuries, you'll have to be evac'd off the planet, failing the mission. And we really love the way this combines with how the characters work, and generally how the characters work themselves. So you'll essentially play a section as a player. So I'll take security, for example, and there's a big deck of recruits. And each recruit has a unique backstory, unique artwork, unique name. And you'll eventually have a collection of people who work in your sector, and you can send them on missions, but they're disposable. They can die. And what's fascinating is that it increases the tension in the game, because you'll do multiple missions, probably with the same characters. You'll come to know them, you'll rank them up, they'll become stronger, they'll get you out of tight scrapes. And it means you care about them and you don't want them to die. And you might even begin playing the game differently based on avoiding danger. And I think that's a really fascinating aspect of Vanguard. What I will say also that's quite funny / horrific is because these characters can die, there's actually a memorial wall in the back of the ship book where when they die, you slot them in. But when you slot them in, you get a reward based on where you put them, which means that these characters dying is good. And I understand that if characters dying, usually things are going bad, so the game's trying to give you a leg up, a little boost. But I have to say it was pretty damn horrific when half of our security section died and the entire ship's morale increased. That's really messed up. Looping back to the ship book, this is a tremendously engaging aspect of Vanguard. And it's actually an evolution of the way these narrative games handle upkeep and upgrading. Essentially, you have this binder, which represents your ship. And in it is a lot of card sleeves, much like what you used to keep your Pokemon cards in back in 2nd grade. And as you explore, you're going to gain cards, maybe discoveries, maybe ship upgrades, and they'll all go into this awaiting folder. When at the beginning of the session, you kind of start setting things up, you'll go through the ship book page by page, and you'll slot these cards where they belong and interact with different areas. And this is tremendously fulfilling.
Even better, the ship book provides a lot of interesting decisions. Typically, you'll have very limited resources to move the ship around and explore, or on which locations on the ship that you will visit. Usually, you'll want to see and do everything, but can't, so it just keeps things really engaging because you then can't wait to get back to the ship book post-mission and attend to everything that you just couldn't get around to last time.
Changing tact, ISS Vanguard is an excellent game, but it's not a perfect game. And while we haven't encountered anything game-breaking that makes us not want to play it, there are a couple of minor niggles you should probably be aware of. First one is if you're interested in this, get it because you want to experience the story, you want this campaign kind of game, and you want to experience all it has to offer. Don't get it because you want to play a tight, tense cooperative game. It's not all that cooperative. All you can really do is if you're in the same section as another player, you can roll 1 dice for them, or you could add a card to kind of help them along. That's it. But we will say there are a lot of cooperative discussions when it comes to the narrative elements, progressing the story, or the best way to explore. But you definitely don't have this crunchy working together to overcome the game puzzle that cooperative players are looking for. In fact, in the planetary exploration, you could all go off to 4 different corners of the map and just meet back up at the end of the scenario, and not a lot would change besides it maybe being a tiny bit harder. Second, there's a lot of setup, teardown, and admin that comes with Vanguard. Worse, a lot of it is actually mid-game, which means you can't have it set up for when people come around and jump in. They have to be part of the admin. Otherwise, they're going to miss important decisions and probably story beats as well. Now, from starting a kind of session, you'll go through the ship book, and that will take about 20 minutes. And to be fair to the game, this is very engaging admin. But then you'll have to spend 15 minutes probably setting up the planet and getting yourself ready to go down, sorting out your characters. Then you'll be playing, and there's constant admin during the exploration because you're discovering things, so you're drawing cards all the time. Then you have to kind of clear up the planet book as you do the after planetary ship book, and you kind of put stuff away and organize and catalog. And this means that a session from start to finish can be up to 4 hours. And this is just something that you need to know because you'll probably have to be able to set that time aside to really get the most out of this game, or be able to leave it set up on the table indefinitely. Lastly, as we touched upon earlier, a lot of the core mechanisms don't meaningfully evolve from the tutorial onwards. And it's quite possible that some of you will be getting pretty tired of them by hour 20, hour 40, hour 60. The one thing that we did find really tedious even now is on or during planetary exploration, you'll often have a card and a location card, and it will have a track on it. And every time you get a success, you move one up this track. And so this means it's going to take multiple turns or attempts to kind of progress that location, crack that puzzle, go through. But it's really not interesting to just do the same exact challenge over and over and over. particularly if it's taking multiple turns or rounds or involving multiple players and you're all sitting there doing the same thing, especially as it occurs all the time and is used as kind of a crutch when there's something important hidden behind that like location check. And it's particularly frustrating if you just don't quite have the right combination of dice that check needs. Final thoughts. We haven't actually completed ISS Vanguard, but at the point we are now, about 20 to 30 hours in, it actually seems to be expanding and opening up and allowing players more exploration and more decision space. So what we can say is that this has been an excellent experience. And if you've been in any way interested by ISS Vanguard, it's probably worth your time.
The story thus far is superb. The scenarios are varied and different, and everything is held up by a rock-solid core of gameplay. There are a few minor issues, but definitely none that would stop us from fully recommending it. And in fact, we're pretty eager to get the extra content and expansions, which is a pretty big turnaround from not having any initial interest in ISS Vanguard.
Yeah, and I think we're also quite interested in maybe doing a second review post-campaign to see if anything changes or if stuff happens that's worth. Thank you, Sensen.
Campaign post-mortem.
Yeah. So that was our review of ISS Vanguard. We hope it was helpful, and we would really love if this was helpful that you would consider subscribing. If you have any questions, please ask us down below, and thank you for your time. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.